Hey, today I'm again talking about 3 movies I got for my birthday, and they are Sex, Lies, and Videotape, Watership Down, and An Unmarried Woman. And technically, there actually is a theme with all 3 of these movies, and that is sex. These 2 more explicitly. This one, there's a big plot point that has to do with sex. Like the whole second half of the movie basically is because of sex, and that's kind of interesting. First up is Sex, Lies, and Videotape. This is a 1989 Steven Soderbergh movie. I've watched so many of his movies. This movie stars Andie MacDowell and James Spader, and 2 other actors who are also good. And it's basically about a married couple who things are kind of maybe on the fritz, and her sister, and then his college friend. And then it's about what the title says. It's about sex, it's about lies, and it's about a videotape. And it's really, really good. I kept thinking to myself while watching this movie that like just the script for it was phenomenal. Like I kept being like, that was a fantastic line, oh my God. Or like, that was such a great character moment. That's just, Don't get me wrong, everything else about the film was great too. Like the shot composition was amazing. The acting was solid. I have no complaints there. But just the script just kept like being like, look at me, I'm freaking great. And I'm like, damn right, you're freaking great. The movie is basically just a big discussion about sexuality and sex life. And that feels really refreshing to me, just to have these very, very open and personal conversations about sex, but also just like what you're attracted to. Like one character is essentially ace. She says a lot of ace rhetoric, and that's really fascinating. And then another character is demisexual. It's the one where you have to emotionally connect with a person in order to be attracted to them sexually. A different character is like that with some other stuff too. And it's just, it's so fascinating. I don't know, I was so enthralled the entire time. Even though most of the movie is just kind of sitting around and talking. It's nothing that crazy, but it just works really well. So yeah, I without a doubt recommend this movie. It's great. If you're kind of worried about like seeing too much sexual stuff, you don't have to worry there, because like even though the movie is very sexual, they don't show anything. I think the most graphic shot is of James Spader changing his shirt in a gas station bathroom. I mean, he is very attractive in the shot, but it's the furthest they go with it really. So yeah, I would say go for it. It's terrific. Next up is Watership Down. This is a 1979 British movie. It's based off a book, and the book is actually my brother Kyle's favorite book. And after watching it, I can totally understand why. It is really, really great. So I went to this movie knowing, that my brother really loved it, and that it's also traumatized a lot of children because people think, oh, it's a cartoon, it's for kids. This is not for kids. It's very graphic and violent, but in a way that makes a lot of sense. It's basically the story of a bunch of rabbits as they try to survive. And it's so fascinating because the story is kind of, I want to say biblical, but even bigger than biblical. It feels a lot like the Planet of the Apes series, the new trilogy, where this feels like this story is the basis for this fictitious bunny world's setting up their religion, essentially. I'm not saying that like the lead bunny is their Jesus figure. It's more just like their creation story. We do see the rabbit's creation story in the movie, and it's great. It's animated differently, and I love that animation. And I just love all the ideas behind it and all the references back to it throughout the movie. But it's kind of like, I would say if the creation story is, Genesis, this movie's more like the story of Moses. There was like one part where I was like, oh, this is kind of like taking the Jews through the desert for 40 years. Like it's almost like that. I think the movie is actually filled with a lot of religious references, but I don't think it really limits itself to just Christianity like a lot of these types of movies would. I also just love like how the story is about so much more as well. It's about survival. It's about escaping repressive regimes. It's about freedom. It's about kindness. It's also about life and death and accepting death. It's just so great, and the animation's wonderful. I honestly think this movie's gonna sit with me for a very, very long time, and the more I think about it, the more I'm gonna love it. It's a fantastic movie. I without a doubt recommend it. And I would almost say this is kind of like the perfect like teenager movie, in the sense of like, it's something that can kind of really open up your mind to just the idea of human history in general, which is a weird thing to say about a movie about bunnies, is it makes you think about all of human history. But it does, and it's so fascinating. Yeah, movie's great. I love it. Watch it. And lastly is An Unmarried Woman. This is a 1978 movie starring a bunch of people I don't know. The basic premise is the title is a lie. She's not unmarried. At the beginning of the movie, she's still married, and then maybe like a fourth of the way into the movie, the husband wants to leave her for someone younger. They're just separated. They're not divorced. And then the rest of the movie, she's basically like attaching herself onto a different guy, and like she's never really single at any point in time. And that was frustrating to me, because that's not what I thought this movie was gonna be, since, you know, An Unmarried Woman. I thought it was gonna be about, you know, exploring who she was as a person, especially now that she's not tied down to another person. She's trying to define herself on her own. And she is kind of doing that, but she's doing it with the crutch of men, and I don't like that. I do like a lot about this movie though. I love how strong of a character she is. She knows who she is, which is kind of contradictory to what I was just saying, but she really does know who she is. I love how she's not afraid to tell a man to piss off when they're being awful. I also loved how strong her daughter is, and really just everything with her daughter. Her daughter was fantastic. And I did like most of the male characters as well. Not the guy who's second build, the bearded guy, I don't remember his name. I really did not like his character at all. Now, this is me looking at this movie with a modern lens. Apparently, this movie did actually help a lot of women who went through divorce. They're like, they can very much so see themselves on screen. So that's great. I'm very, very happy that this movie was able to be catharsis for those people. But I just really don't think this movie pushed itself enough. Like, it did push itself a bit, but it just needed to go like 10 times further. And apparently Jane Fonda was actually offered the lead role in this, and after reading the script, she's like, this thing isn't political enough. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good way to describe it, is it's not political enough. It needs to do more. Like, what it does is good, but it needs to be better. But don't get me wrong, I didn't hate this movie. I still liked this movie. It was enjoyable. I'm glad I got it. I'm curious how I will feel about it upon a rewatch. I almost wonder if this would be like a potentially good breakup movie. I would say if you're intrigued by it, it's definitely not a waste of time. I think this might strike a chord with you. It has good potential too. It just didn't for me, and so that's where it was disappointing. But it has with others, so yeah. Alrighty, now for today's rankings. First up, we got Sex, Lies, and Videotapes, sitting at number 29 in the really liked category. And then super close behind it is Watership Down, sitting at number 31 in the really liked category. Yep, just 2 behind it. It's so good. And then bringing up the rear is An Unmarried Woman, sitting at number 113 in the liked category. And this is out of a total of 202 old movies so far this year. And that brings the grand total out of all the movies I've seen so far this year up to 246.